Welcome to Crossing the Line Podcast. My name's Charlie Collicutt, and joining me, Jim Freak, as per, Oliver Rednall. And today we're very excited to have along with us the director of some episodes of Silent Witness, Endeavour, as well as some of the best-selling video games of all time. I'm going to drop a few there: Witcher 3, Fable, Alien Isolation, Castlevania, and so much more. I'm so excited to speak to you today. Kate Saxon, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you very much.
Yeah, you had a easy job getting in this morning?
Yeah, well, I couldn't find this place, but otherwise fine.
Yeah, we're going to put a sniper on the roof next time to stop anyone coming. So, but yeah. We're wondering, as actors, obviously we have to audition for things, TV, theatre, film. How does a director go about obtaining work? And do you pitch your idea for a show or a project, and then they decide? How can you talk us about the process of how that comes about?
I think it's not dissimilar, actually, for directors as it is for actors, because we do need to pitch and go through an interview process and be chosen. So, yes, of course, we can direct, produce and create your own work, particularly in theatre, if you want to do the whole fundraising and getting all of that together. But same with films, I guess, with short films and so on. But generally, it's more similar to the actor's process in that it's, you've got to be seen by the right people, and then you've got to deliver the goods at the meeting and then hopefully get the job. So it varies, obviously, with theatre, because I've been doing theatre for a terribly long time now. It's a bit more informal. It's often me calling artistic directors, talking about suggested plays that I'd like to do, and then they choose to either do it or not do it in their season. With television, it's very much, going for a meeting. The television is the biggest prep in many ways, because a television show will expect you to know their show inside out and be able to talk about it intelligently and creatively about what they've done prior to you coming in, understand their style, be able to talk about what you might want to add to it, anything that you feel you weren't so keen on, and normally they'll send you at least a couple of scripts to look at to prep how you might shoot them. So you might want to do some kind of mood board as well when you go in, have some thoughts about how you would shoot a scene or two. So that's quite extensive prepping for a TV meeting. I've only been doing television for about 7 years, though, so maybe at some point in the future there'll be a stage where it gets more similar to my theatre meetings, where it's a bit more informal and a bit of a chat. But I'm not there yet with the television. It's a very formal process, and quite often a couple of interviews for television, where you might meet some of the producers first of all, and then you go back to meet the execs if you get through to the next sort of shortlist stage.
So something like Silent Witness, it's got like 23 seasons now, is that right?
Yeah, I think it was season 23 I was on. Wow. I keep forgetting. People keep asking that.
So
I think
many.
It's season 23.
It's just all one massive blur.
They've just given up counting now.
It's got X, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So with something like that, which has got such an extensive history, how did you say you need to know the show inside out? How have you gone about pitching that to them, and how you would do it?
Yeah, it's about, obviously, as you say, when it's a long running...
A tad closer.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
When it's a long running show, you need to show a knowledge of it, not just a recent knowledge, really. You need to kind of show that you've had a look back through the archives a little bit, I think. I would say you need to. I don't know if all directors do it in the same way. And just think intelligently about the kind of stories they're telling, the way they want the character arcs to work, the way they shoot it, what the ambitions are for the show, the aesthetic of it. I think it's important to show a good understanding of that, and then be able to illustrate why you might fit that world or be able to bring something new. And obviously, because I'm a theatre director by trade, and I was actually an actress before I was a theatre director, so because of my background, often people meet me because they're wanting to talk to me about the performance side, particularly because they know I'm not film school background. I'm not going to be shots first. I'm going to be performance first.
Oh, that's great, because a lot of actors say that. A lot of directors will just be like, yeah, do your thing and we're going to worry about this. So it's good that you've got a background of that. Have you felt that that's helped you a lot?
Yeah, it does.
Things?
And actors, both on when I direct games, because I direct video games as well, both when I direct video games and when I direct television, actors within minutes say to me, oh my God, you direct theatre as well, don't you? Because they can just, there's a different language.
I was going to say that there is a different way of speaking to people and able to elicit a certain performance by going, you're under this circumstance, imagine you're doing this,
Yeah.
rather than just go, why aren't you being sad at this moment?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
talking about intentions and talking about the conflicts and all those things. And actually, actors do notice it very quickly and always appreciate it. So it is important to me, the actors, the people in front of the camera telling the story, they are carrying the text. The text is always first and foremost to me, and the people that carry that text are the actors. So that is the most important thing. And then obviously you want to create a beautiful aesthetic as well and be ambitious with your shots. But I think the good thing about coming from a theatre background is that I'm very used to working on my feet and working collaboratively. So when I work on screen, I'm not somebody who has to storyboard every beat I'm going to shoot before I get on the floor. I don't want to do that. If it's a big, complicated sequence where I'm using a lot of very expensive equipment and I know I've got to be very efficient, otherwise I'm not going to get it, then yes, you might want to be a bit more specific about exactly what your shots will be before you shoot in a lot of detail. Otherwise, what I tend to do is I always have a shot list for every scene before I go onto the floor, and I've thought about tonally and story-wise what that scene needs to achieve, where it's coming from, where it's going to, where it sits in the arc of the characters. If there's any fakery, often characters don't say what they really mean. What's the truth, what isn't, what needs to be forefront, what do we need to leave the audience questioning or begging for more. So thinking about all of those elements, not just how it will look, and then being open to actually throwing that all out of the window on the floor. If the actors want to work in a certain way and they've got a really strong idea of how they feel that scene fits for them, then I think one of my fortes, because of my theatre background, is that I'm very good at being responsive and collaborative in the moment. I don't need to stick to a plan. And I'm very quick with that. The speed is probably also a lot down to the video games, because I direct a lot of video games and they work very, very fast. For various reasons, actors' time is expensive when it's voiceover or performance capture or motion capture. Recording studio time is expensive. The material is normally huge. Some of the games I've done, like The Witcher 3 that you mentioned, or some of the Fable games.
I've got a million questions about them.
They can take years, on and off. Not full time, but on and off. So there is a lot to do. So I have to, when I'm directing voiceover sessions particularly, I have to learn to be very, very specific and very clear and detailed and very succinct, and in a way that I can direct performances that will have an immediate result. There's none of the kind of organic exploration that you'd have in theatre. So it's actually really good training for television, because that kind of speed and that ability to communicate something quickly with an effective result is very helpful on television as well.
So coming from a theatre background, how did you obviously went into directing theatre first, did you make that sort of bridge that gap between, was it video games you did first?
Yeah, so my route was actress, education director, then director, and then I did my assisting years in opera.
Which is completely different again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
I like changing it around.
I was about
a
to
lot.
say you're like, people talk about having a toolkit or like an artist palette or something.
Yeah.
You basically hit every single one and then manage to draw it all together, which gives you such a wide variety of options.
Yeah, and I want to keep doing more things. So that was the sort of assistant directing years, and then I was reviving operas, directing theatre, and then predominantly it was theatre for a good while, and then I started doing games. I can't remember how long ago, possibly 16 odd years ago. So I was quite early in the development of the birth of kind of performances being key in games.
How did that sort of come? How did that land on your lap then? Because games are very very different from theatre.
Yeah, to be honest, it's nepotism.
Okay.
Because
Honesty.
Honesty.
Yeah.
It's because somebody I went to university with. It's not really nepotism. It's good. I mean, he had to think I was good at my job, but somebody I went to university with knew a lot of my theatre work and was running a studio that was specialising in games, and they.
Which studio was this?
It's called Side UK.
Okay.
And they are what's called an outsourcer for games. So what they do is they will cast the game, they will attach the director, they'll book mocap studios and so on. They might assign writers, composers, depending on what the game developer wants them to provide. And one of the people that owned Side knew my work really well. And they, at that stage in games, they were nearly always being directed by the clients themselves, the people that were making the game, the developers, who obviously aren't directors in the way that we talk about directing. They're game developers. They've often come from a more animation background or computer programming background or a game design background. So obviously some of them are wonderful at directing and have found a natural voice with that. Others aren't so great at it. And they knew they weren't necessarily getting the performances they wanted. And quite often they were spending a lot of money on starry actors and then going, oh, God, it didn't really work. That was a bit shit. And they couldn't really figure out why. And, of course, it was mainly, to be honest, because some of the developers just didn't have the language. So they'd be asking the actors to just be better or be funnier or be sexier or be more like Stephen Fry.
Classic direction.
Whatever,
Yeah.
So, obviously, there's a lot of actors getting their backs up and getting really quite pissed off in the booth and not delivering performances. And so the colleague of mine from university who knew my work called me and said, look, I know you're not a gamer, so this might not appeal to you, but you're very good at storytelling and directing, and we're at this stage where we're talking to game developers about getting in professional directors, and we think you'd be really good for it. Would you like to come and give it a go with a game? And if it doesn't work out, then let's not worry about it. So the first game I did was called Dragon Quest VIII. And
You've done the Dragon... Oh, okay. More questions. Yeah.
And it won loads of awards for best performances in a game that year. So it worked. So that sort of carried on. And then I've done, as you know, lots and lots of games since then. So that was how that came about. And then funnily enough, it's because of the games mocap shoots that I started. It's also random, my career. I'd be working with actors on mocap shoots and they'd say, you do telly as well, don't you? And I go, no, I don't know anything about cameras. And they go, well, you'd be great doing telly because you're sort of doing it already with these mocap shoots and you're theatre directing and you just don't know you are. And I went, maybe. So then I started...
Whatever, just send me some TV,
whatever. So then I started researching that possibility more and thinking, it would be quite fun to get into doing telly as well, and went and got some experience, wrote to executive producers, asked them if I could come and do work experience when I was in between jobs and kind of learned more about it.
So whereabouts did you do that then?
Whitechapel.
Oh yeah.
I went Whitechapel and shadowed a couple of directors there. And then I applied for the BBC training that EastEnders does. Mm-hmm. They do it intermittently when they need to get a bigger body of directors again because directors have moved on. Didn't
you have to... I saw in a video that you had to do a car scene, like a stunt scene in EastEnders, your first ever one.
Immediately.
Yeah, that's right.
So they trained us. There were four of us they selected that year. I think they train new directors about every 4 years, and they train about 4 directors at a time. And there were 4 of us being trained for a couple of weeks, I think it was, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And then they told all 4 of us they would employ us. They'd like to keep us as directors, so we were very pleased about that. And they said, of course, on your first block, we won't give you any massive stunts or anything like that. We'll give you a mentor on your first block and it will sort of ease you in.
And then he looked directly into your eyes and went, except you.
Yeah. And then I had a car stunt. I mean, it wasn't the most, complicated car stunt. It was just around the square in Walford. But still, it was a car stunt and it was terrifying. But we did it and... it actually worked rather nicely. It was a sort of random stunt where a car went out of control and then they knocked over a pram that Jessie Wallace was pushing and thought they'd killed her baby, but it was just full of meat.
Perfect.
Obviously.
Perfect.
Yeah.
When you do anything like that with an extra bit of action in, if you like, on a TV show, do you get extra time for that? Because EastEnders is quite a quick turnaround.
You do get a little bit longer, yeah. So if it's a really simple 2-hander scene, you might literally shoot it in 30 minutes. It can be really, really quick.
That's rapid.
Yeah.
So how many pages would that be of dialogue?
Let's say it's only a kind of page of a 2-hander.
Okay.
But if you've got a more complicated thing like the small car stunt, you perhaps would have all morning on it. But you do have to shoot very quickly. You only have 10 days to shoot a whole week of episodes. So that's 2 hours you shoot in 10 days.
Yeah, that's quick.
Mm.
That's really quick. And would that be would that be something on Silent Witness as well? Or do you get a little longer for that?
No, you have longer. So Silent Witness, you do a block, which is 2 episodes of 1 hour each. And I think we shot for 25 days for that 2 hours. So
you get a lot more. And from when the episode is shot to when it is aired, how long are you working on post-production on that? So when you say, right, it's finished, you can now keep it in the can until it's broadcast. How long is that? Yeah,
it's the TV contracts on something like Silent Witness, you'll have about a month to prep, which is obviously working with all the different departments, design, locations, casting, so on and so forth, planning your shoot. And then you have, about 25 days to shoot. And then you have about 4 weeks in the edit room doing the fine cut. And then after that, your contract goes sort of part-time. You effectively, your contract finishes at the end of the fine cut.
Right.
But then if you're available to do the post beyond that as well, then obviously that's much better if you can stay available for it. And it goes part-time then because all the people in post need some time to do their work before you can kind of go in and give feedback and fine-tune it. So when it goes to that, the post often spreads over several weeks. But as I said, very part-time by that point. So at that stage, you're going into the grade, any visual effects, online, ADR, all of that happens then. The music, of course, the scoring, the sound design and so forth, that all happens at that stage.
Okay, and how much say do you have in the scoring? Do you, obviously you'll say, I want it coming in here or whenever, but on the creation of it itself, do you have much input on that?
You do have quite a lot, actually, because what happens is that in the fine cut, you and the editor put music and sound on that is a guide for what you want. And then you normally have a session a day with the sound designer and with the composer where you talk through, it's got a music spot and a sound spot, and you talk through all of those cues you've put on and you talk through what you're aiming for. And then they'll go away and they'll do their original versions of that. And then you have a process where you listen to that with them again and tweak and make any notes. So on Endeavour, it was very exciting because the composer, Matt, is absolutely brilliant. And we recorded his score at Abbey Road Studios.
Oh, really?
In Studio 3, which is the one the Beatles used, which was great fun. So 55-strong orchestra. Wow. And it was just phenomenal. You know, I hadn't had that experience personally before as a TV director to sort of have that, that.
And would you and the music director be in very close kind of, I want to say concert, just because it's music related, but are you talking quite a lot in order to make sure that what he's producing and what you're producing line up, even though he's not necessarily on set with you the entire time? So
during the actual filming, when the editor's doing their rough cut, the assembly for that each week will go out to people like the composer and so on. So they've got a sense of what's going on. They don't normally really start until everything's assembled and there's something there in the fine cut. But with Matt on Endeavour, we then spent a day at his studio once he'd written the music, going through it and then going, actually, you know, in that moment, I'd love to pull out the sort of thriller aspect more. So could you keep that going longer and stay off the action side of it until that moment in the scene? So you can be quite specific working together about scoring those beats in the story. Which is really, it's really exciting part of the process. I love all of that. I love the bringing it all together at the end. How close from when you start an episode, or 2 episodes, for example, say like a block, is your vision to how it's finished? Does it change much along the way? Do you think, actually, no, we'll do it like this? Like you say, you don't storyboard, you just have the shot list. Does it often change a lot to the final product? Because obviously in the edit room, you can kind of chop and change things. You know, I don't really know if I know the answer because as it evolves and you're working on it, you sort of forget what you might have thought it would be before. So it becomes what it kind of is organically. Yeah, I don't really know. And also I think because of my process being as I described, I'm not set on a sort of final product so much. That I might be for certain scenes. Okay. You know, certain finale scenes or big moments, I'll have a very strong idea of what I want, and I normally have a very strong idea of what I want in design and location and so on. I've always got a very clear, I guess again, it helps coming from the theatre background, because in theatre, obviously, the concept is mine and the designers, and we work closely together to interpret that script. In television, obviously, it's not so much mine, because if the television is already established, it has a style, it has an aesthetic already.
What about something like video games, for instance?
Video games, similarly, it's definitely not mine. That's the game designer and the game director. So the game director has, the developers that make the game, they have the absolute overarching creative eye on the game. Obviously, they work very closely with the game designer and the lead animator.
But you as the director, do you not get, not final say, obviously, the producer or... So I'm thinking of Fable, for instance.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's several sequels along. And there are bits where, music has got to come in for this bit and then disappear here.
Yeah, no, in games, I'm not involved in anything other than the performance as we create the performance.
Okay.
So in games, my role is the least involved in that way, because what
You'd be
happens
there for years,
is that,
wouldn't you, I imagine?
I mean, you would be. I'd have to give up on my other jobs and be resident as a developer for years if I was going to have a relationship that's more akin to how I'd work in telly or theatre. But the way it tends to work in games is that developers work for a very, very long time on a single game, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people working on those games normally. And the performance side of it comes in quite late in their process, because they've normally done quite a lot of testing of vertical slices and kind of mocked things up quite early on at different stages in the development before they even start recording the game.
You just mentioned a vertical slice. What is that? Sorry.
Yeah, vertical slice is when they create a small portion of the game that's normally got some cinematic scenes, which are called cutscenes in games, and some gameplay and so on in it. And often it'll be about 30 minutes long, and it's a kind of tester pilot for them.
A beta kind of thing. So that
and they'll have game testers, play it and give them feedback, and they'll use it to talk about funding and how much it's going to cost and what their ambitions are and so on. So normally by the time I'm on board, those things have already happened.
Right.
And obviously I'll be on board for casting. But again, that differs in terms of my role there, because whilst I'll do the auditions and I'll make my recommendations to the developers, it's not for me to choose the cast. Whereas obviously with theatre and television, it is up, I have final say, really. It's not quite true, because
but to a certain degree,
if the execs want to say, "Oh no, we really think that person's not right," but it's unlikely. If you're really passionate about the actor, they'll normally go, "Yeah, we can see it. That's great." Obviously, there are complications if it's a very commercial project in theatre and they need stars to lead it. We all know those complications that come in sometimes. But with games, I will lead the auditions. I will do my notes. Those audition tapes and my notes will go back to the developer, and an awful lot of people at the games developers will have a say. And it goes into this kind of huge melting pot where everybody has a say, and then eventually they make a decision.
And how does an audition work for a video game? Because I've in the past I've had to send in like a voice tape of here are some lines, here's different moods we want you to do for the different lines. But obviously if you're doing it live, is that a performance then? Because you see, going back to Fable, you've got Fassbender, you've got Stephen Fry, you've got Ben Kingsley. These are all well-established names doing main characters in the game. How do you get them to perform or audition?
Yeah, for the Fable example you're mentioning, with those A-listers like Fassbender, Stephen Fry, and Naomi Harris, Simon Pegg, there was just so many in it. It was crazy.
It was a AAA cast. It was mental. I remember playing and thinking, "This is Ollie doesn't play games."
No idea what's going on.
I am.
I know Fable. My brother had it.
I
used to play it, but I've never played it myself.
I am hoping that there is a fourth one in the works at the moment.
Well, if only all those actors work with me on games and they go, "I'd love to do some theatre with you, Kate," and I go, "Yes, please," and of course they don't.
They don't.
They don't really want to.
Films and all that.
Yes.
Kind of thing, yeah.
But anyway, with the people like that, there were straight offers.
Okay.
And then there was a huge other cast. I think sometimes actors worry that because they know that there's a lot of games that they've got these starry people leading them, that there's nothing else going on. But on Fable, I can't remember how big the cast was. It was probably 80 people, something like that, extra to those A-listers.
What about something like The Witcher? Because
huge, probably bigger cast than I've just said on Fable.
That was absolutely gigantic. And did you work on like the DLC for that? Did you?
What's
Yes.
the DLC?
Downloadable content. So
Downloadable
it'll be
content.
the add-ons
Afterwards,
to the
like
game.
the expansion packs, I used to call them.
Exactly.
Yes.
Get
yeah.
a disc. And
Well,
then load it
they're
up.
interchangeable words, but Witcher had two massive ones, which, to be honest, were about as big as normal games are.
Yes, I think I did one of. I think I did
Heart
one of the
Stone
DLCs.
or Blood and Wine?
Yes, the Blood and Wine. I think
The
I
vampire
did.
one.
Yes.
Yes.
I can't remember.
Yes.
I've done so many games; they sort of melded into one. Maybe
Maybe.
I might have done that one. I'll have to look on my IMDb, and it will tell me.
Very good.
Pull it up, Charlie. Pull it up.
I'll pull it up now.
Yeah,
But my other question, kind of regarding directing a video game, is something like an RPG, so a role-playing game for people who don't know what that is, which is The Witcher, which is Fable, and you've got all these choices and all these diverging storylines that what could happen if you did this and what happened if you did this, or if you're evil or good or whatever. How does that differ to something like Alien, which is a tension horror game? It is narratively driven. There is one, you've got to get from A to B without being attacked by the alien.
Yeah.
How do you manage to direct that? How do you, because that's quite a different style.
Yeah, they
I
are.
imagine.
They are very different. And Alien Isolation was full facial likeness as well, i.e. the animated avatars look exactly like the actors that played them, which also happened when I directed Mafia 3. They all look like their actors as well. And on Alien Isolation, it was a performance capture shoot. So everything was shot up at Audio Motion, which is a studio in Oxfordshire. Or captured is what we actually say with performance capture, because it's capturing the movement of the dots on the bodysuit. It's not filming you. So with Alien Isolation, there was a linear storyline effectively, and it was very filmic. And so we were able to work in a fairly linear way and capture all the material, and then come into the voice booth later to ADR it, anything that needs to be re-recorded and so on. With a game like Witcher, as you say, it's a huge branching game. And even though we originated the performances here in England, we didn't do the mocap. We originated it through voiceover. And then the mocap was done in Poland, where the game developer is CD Projekt.
Red, and they do it all over there.
They do it over there.
Okay.
But they use the performances that we originate as the starting point. So they take those into the mocap studio and perform
around the dialogue that you've recorded
Yeah.
already. So is that kind of like how, I don't know if you do animation as well.
I have directed one feature film, animated feature film.
Because anime works similarly to that, if I'm not mistaken.
Uh,
Or old animation anyway. I was reading something about, let's use Disney's Aladdin, for
Yeah.
instance. They had Robin Williams go into a booth and give everything. And
Yeah.
then the animators would...
Yeah, the
Trace
line
around
he did
that.
that. Jeremy Irons was speaking about Scar.
Exactly.
They'd literally film him, and he didn't realise how much they would animate around what he actually performed.
Whereas something like manga movies,
yeah.
they create it, and then you have to voice
Yes.
over that bit that their mouth's moving.
Yeah, the lip flap,
Yeah.
as we call it. Yeah. Yes, and that's true. And I think the animators very much like taking the lead from the performances. They want to embody that performance, and animators consider themselves actors as well, because they are creating that performance as much as the actor is, because they're actually creating all the visuals of it. So they do want to work kind of symbiotically together with what the actors offered. And because of the branching aspect of The Witcher, just to answer your other sort of side of that question, The Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 were both huge, and they took a very, very long time. So I was lead director, but there were 2 or 3 other directors working consecutively for good chunks of the recording time to get all the material done. And
so you wouldn't be the lead director, so there'd be 2 or 3 of you just because of the volume.
I was lead director, and then there were a couple of other directors who joined because of the volume, just to get stuff done.
Sure.
So, and they did chunks of it as well. So what happened is that I set the style, I set the characters and so on, and then we might go, okay, that character's very established with that actor now, and this is what I'm doing with it, and the other directors would come in and see what we were doing, and then maybe take over with some of the actors from there on.
And would they be kind of like side characters for side quests, whereas you'd keep, I can't remember his name, but the guy who did Geralt, for instance?
Tended to be that, but it wasn't always that formal, because people's availability, the way it fell out, because games are often recorded in quite sort of piecemeal way. You know, a developer will tend to, they've never written everything before you start recording. Very, very, very rarely. And on something as big as The Witcher, no way. So when a chunk of work is ready to be recorded, it gets booked into a studio and gets recorded, and so on and so forth, and that happens over the whole period. So there's always got to be a lot more flexibility in games, because an actor might not be available that week. They might have to do it in the evening, or they might have to do weekend, or they might have to wait for a week for them, so on and so forth. Director might not be available anymore, and it all has to move around a bit more fluidly. And because of the branching aspect of the game, CD Projekt were very good at creating an asset for the script where we could use hyperlinks for me to jump around to where that scene could go next.
Sure.
So if there were 3 branches, I'd have a hyperlink and it would take me to branch 1, and then I could hyperlink back up to the feeder line for the branch, jump down to the second one, do the same, jump down to the third one, and so on, so that I'd be able to guide the actor through where they are. Because obviously the danger with a branching game is that, let's say, talking simplistically, Geralt has 3 choices, and one is he's unhappy about it, one is he's happy, and one he's indifferent. If he keeps the tone of the unhappy one because he reads that first, it can very easily bleed into the happy branch, but it obviously shouldn't bleed at all. So it's very important when I'm directing a game like that I'm really clear exactly what's going on, and the skill for actors to sort of fine tune on a game like that is to absolutely be able to play the truth in the moment, and in the moment only, because you can't keep a hang on of what's gone before, and you can't necessarily have a sort of precursor to what's coming next, because in a game it's all about the player's choice what's coming next. So you have to just be open enough as a performer to be in that moment and deliver that line with truth, and that's it. Simple as that, nothing more or less.
Crikey.
Also, on which you might be interested to know, in the studio, I put a massive kind of almost looked like a family tree of what was going on, because we did it for so long.
Yeah.
And the actors obviously would go, "Oh my God, have I even met Yorvith yet?
Yeah.
Am I his mate? Do I hate him?
Yeah.
Do I know him? Did I kill him?" You know,
Yeah.
I'd get really confused.
But does that also branch? Because there are times
Yeah.
where you can kill
So
characters who won't disappear.
it went all the way around the studio.
Oh my God.
Where I just started drawing this branch of where the roots would go, and it would branch off all over the place. And then I could, particularly with Doug, who played Geralt, I could go, "Okay, Doug, come and look at the branch again. This is where you're at. You haven't done any of that. I know you've just been recording all that with me, but it doesn't exist.
Wow.
Today that doesn't exist."
That's really handy to have that. Because
Yeah.
I can imagine, I mean, on a film, it's a lot even less than a game. When you've got a game with multiple avenues to take and stuff, it must be quite a feat to keep up. Do you ever play the games afterwards?
I was going to say, are you a gamer at all?
I'm not a gamer.
At all? Like, they're not even interested to see how it's kind of...
I haven't got enough time.
That's a fair point.
The thought of how much time it would take to play these games. Obviously, I know a lot of people in the games world who are gamers, and I'll get them to play me through stuff.
Yeah.
And when some of the games I've worked on a lot, they would play me things through with a dev kit, which means that it's a developer kit that it can jump
different parts of it,
Yeah.
so that you can
that's great.
see
it can
what's
jump
happening
things.
at when
Exactly.
such and such dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
so-
they might play me through on a dev kit and go, you know, can we have your opinion on this, this, and this before? But that sort of harkens back to your question earlier. All of that post-production I'm not involved with when I'm directing games. So I'll get the performances in the voice booth and in the mocap studio, and then all of that is handed back to the developers and the game director and the animators and the designers and the story leads and all these people do their thing, often for a long time after, putting all of that together and creating the final project you see. And I'm long gone by then. The relationship is a very different one.
Fair enough. Something with Castlevania is obviously got a massive, long legacy to it. Do you have to go and read up on all the lore? Do they give you like a Bible, which is this thick, and you've got to go and...
Yeah, again, it depends on the developer, whether they want to be very faithful to the books or lore that it might come from. And obviously I need to take their guide on that. And some give you a lot of material, some barely give you anything. It really varies. With the Castlevania one, it was developed by a Spanish developer, Mercury Steam, and they had a very strong idea of what they wanted to do with their story, and they didn't really want me to go back to other material.
Sure.
They just wanted me to understand what they were after. With The Witcher, on the other hand, they were brilliant at giving me, I had a huge Bible, effectively, because in The Witcher, there's also words that don't exist. There's fictional words
the
and
magic
language
and the monsters and all
places,
that kind of thing.
and it's complicated. And I'd have a whole kind of Bible of what all these things were, and I'd even have an audio asset of the game narrative lead saying all of the unknown names,
It must be like dreaming this stuff after a while.
Yeah, you just get so used to knowing how these bizarre things are said.
Sure.
And then on things like Mafia 3, because that was set in New Orleans after the Vietnam War, they were very, very keen on historical accuracy and reflecting the racism in that period and place and time well. And so there was a lot of talk with the writers about that and real stories and reflecting them. So it really does vary according to the game.
Wow. I'm really nerding out here. This is really, really interesting for me. Oh, this is fascinating.
Having done such a variety of different things as a director in your career, where would you like to go now? Would you ever write something yourself, or would you like to do a film? Is there anything particular?
I am working on a film now, which is in development at the moment, a feature film.
And how has that come to find you?
I don't know. I think I was recommended and they interviewed various people and asked me to do it.
Oh, great. So and when will you start work on that?
We've already started work.
Okay. Is that a thriller or a
No,
drama?
it's a very simple sort of coming-of-age journeying story about a young woman in Yorkshire who is living with her very elderly great uncle, who she's been sort of carer for a bit, and he's been a surrogate parent to her. And he dies, and she goes on a journey of discovery about his past and the war that he went through. And she goes travelling to find her brother and to scatter his ashes. And so it's very much a sort of journeying self-discovery film. It's a beautiful film, but at the moment we're still in very early stages with working the script. So it'll be a way off yet.
Okay, that's fantastic. Do you remember the first time you ever saw an episode that you directed on TV?
No.
I suppose you'd seen it 100 times before it went on TV and maybe not even watched it.
Yeah, that's quite possible. To be honest, by the time they do go on TV, you have literally watched them so many hundreds of times you never want to watch them again.
Yeah. Was it EastEnders or Doctors?
EastEnders was the first thing I started on.
And how long ago was that now?
Yeah, 7 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, but it's gone quickly since then.
Yeah, it has actually. Yeah.
Crazy. Are you working on anything like immediately now next to be on TV or?
No, I don't know what I'm doing next. So I've just finished Endeavour.
Yeah, that's right.
The final episode, which is on Sunday. And I'm now just out of that, so I'm having meetings for the next ones. Often it's quite a quick turnaround with telly. It's similar to actors.
Yeah.
They'll often meet directors quite late, and you start your prep very soon after you've had the interviews normally. So we're not on a dissimilar sort of schedule for the way it works for you.
Okay. We finally ask a question to all of our guests, and that is there a film or films that you are ashamed that you haven't seen? That perhaps you might say, yeah, I've seen that, or like to stay quiet when someone talks about it. Which ones bring to mind?
I know nothing about Harry Potter.
Really?
I have seen the theatre show because I've got so many friends in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did go to that. I had no idea what was going on.
Wow.
I'd not watched the films nor read the books.
I believe this Harry guy is magic or something like that.
I think he seemed to be.
Fair enough. And is that something that you would want to watch at some point, or is just something that you're like, just don't ask me any questions, please?
Yeah, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I might one day if I'm on a plane and...
Yeah, you've got
all eight films are there.
Plus the new 2 spin-offs.
Yeah, the Fantastic Beasts and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
But other than Harry Potter, is there a classic film, like a cult film you think you might not have, other than Harry Potter?
Oh, I can't think. I'm sure there's many I've not seen, but I can't think.
No, so Harry Potter's the...
Yeah, that's the one that springs to mind that most people do know.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well,
I've watched Star Wars. All of Star Wars.
So our guest last night hadn't watched Star Wars, and
she worked with Mark Hamill.
She'd be doing Nightfall with Mark Hamill, who's obviously Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
he's one of those like, oh my god.
I haven't watched the latest one yet, but I will.
Don't waste your time.
Okay. We'll cut that bit out.
We'll cut that bit out.
If someone from Disney's watching, they're like, right.
Yeah.
And you want to interview somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll cut that. That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
This has been enlightening. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.